Welcome back. So we've been a little bit of a break from doing podcasts, but we're back now. Want to talk a little bit. We've gotten some questions, especially on social media, talking about is this an Indigenous-led organization? So I wanted you to address that. So do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, first of all, I really want to respect that question. I think that's a very good question to ask. And I also want to respect how when Indigenous people have seeked out mental health, and what we've been getting is that it hasn't been a positive experience. So when we see something like Indigenous Psychological Services, we really see Western, and our name is Indigenous Psychological Services, but it's also Kakia Miawawan, which is all-encompassing our health, all the balance of all of those things are really important, the encompassing of all. And so to respect that question of, is this an Indigenous-led organization, I think is a good question, and I really appreciate that kind of question. And I also want to say that I am, I was raised in a northern community of a settler approach, but also my mother being Indigenous or Native from Swan River First Nation, is that I really didn't have that opportunity to grow up that way, to the traditional land, the teachings, the medicines, and all of those things. And the language, my mom is a fluent Cree speaker. She won't say she is, but other people have said she's been such a really good speaker of the language. And part of growing up is for me to not identify. So it's kind of like a loaded question in such a mixed way. And I knew that if I identified, I knew that I was Indigenous, and I knew I was from Swan River. My great-great-grandfather, Charles Nisotesis, was one of the people that signed the Treaty 8 signature. And so there's a part of me that grew up in a way that I wanted to embrace my culture, but there was so much violence to identify with it. So I would always say, well, I'm only 25% or I'm only 40%, and I would dye my hair and do these things to really fit in because I didn't want to experience the violence. So a part of my life journey of creating IPS was I went through this journey of who am I? And I had a significant amount of trauma. And who am I? And what am I going to be? If I can't be myself, if I can't be Indigenous, what am I? And so part of the healing journey was to actually embrace that and belong and be and just do what it is to be in that kind of way and to live that way, because it's a way of life. It's not just something that I do, but I really honor and respect the way of life. And so even though I'm still raised as a settler, I have a lot of confusion. So I understand that question. Is this an Indigenous-led organization? I understand because I kind of grew up in a way of being very shameful for being Indigenous or wanting to identify. And also Indigenous people that are in this place of being a psychologist can really support Indigenous people. So being an Indigenous psychologist myself is what people are looking for and what they want, because we went through this journey and we understand it. Or if we specialize in it, we've done the research, we do the work, we walk the talk, and we really understand what life's about. And so I also want to say, even though that I was raised in a settler approach, it didn't mean that I was raised in a way that I didn't blend, I hid. I really hid. And so I hid because of the violence that could happen. And when I came to hide, when I stepped out of not hiding, the violence didn't stop. There's still violence towards coming out and being who you are. There's still some form of violence, but now I know how to handle it. Now I know how to work with it. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah. And I remember when past podcasts you've talked too about really trying to hide your indigeneity. Mm-hmm. As an Indigenous woman, you saw a lot of violence, right? And we had a discussion not so long ago with Marcus about safety. And we need to be safe. And I think when people are asking, they're also asking, different questions. Because does Indigenous-led means something different to a lot of different people, right?
Yeah.
Like it can mean, do you have elders supporting you?
Yeah. So great. Thank you for bringing that up. Okay, so I'm just going to go back to how
Sure,
IPS
absolutely.
was actually created. And so when I was in a really dark time of my life, that's when I actually started to be like, I knew there was a creator. I didn't call it God, but I was like, creator, what am I doing? Why am I here? Because I actually didn't want to live. And that was kind of like, why do I want to live? And what was really happening? And at the darkest time of my life, that's when I saw like an eagle fly by. And that was a very first start of opening up my spirituality. And so I really prayed and I've overcome many obstacles, single parent, going to masters, poverty, like you name it. It was just barrier after barrier. But my spirituality had always pointed out that there was something I needed to do. And so when I wanted to quit school and I wanted to give up, a vision came to me many times. And it was like I needed to create a place where people belong and feel safe. And as soon as I started to get those dreams, I really attended ceremonies in sweats and really connected with the elders, especially in my community, which is in the Treaty 8 territory. And so the more that I had these dreams and attended ceremony, the more it became really, really clear. And that was the time I was doing my master's, and I knew that at that time I really started to go into the science of why culture works, because I could see a difference on me. And so when I graduated and really wanting to take this on, it was a matter of time of when, and then COVID happened. And then COVID happened where I would get at least 25 calls a week, just maybe exaggerating, about people looking for an Indigenous provider. And then when COVID happened, it was 25 calls a day where I just couldn't answer my phone. And so that is when I really seek the guidance of the elders, and I knew it was time. And I would go to the ceremony, I'd offer my protocols, my tobacco, my print, and a vision of my auntie, Clara Woodbridge, came, and she was actually the founder of many Indigenous organizations here in Edmonton. And she came, and when she came, it was like, that woman was so strong. Like, you didn't mess with her. Like, she was just an advocate. There's so many stories about Auntie Clara Woodbridge of how she helped people come off the streets and getting into housing and programs. She was connected to Bent Arrow. She was connected to the IAAW, the Advancement of Women Institute. She was connected to all of these things, helping people with the right to vote, especially for women, through a different organization. She did so much. And it was like, I needed that to kind of validate this was the time that I really needed to show up for my family and put this forward. So every year I always go to ceremony and I put my protocols in, because just because I did it once doesn't mean that Indigenous Psychological Services is going to be here forever. That's not how it works. That this is an ongoing, and that we're always, as an organization, needing to attend those ceremonies to request for permission. It's so important to request for permission to do what we're doing, to get the help of our ancestors. And then also to when we change, we still need to go to those ceremonies. We do pipe ceremonies, we do those sweats to see if this is supposed to be in the way it is and how it needs to change and grow. And we always have Indigenous knowledge keepers, speakers come in all the time to either present to the team, to present in groups. We're going to try to have our podcast to be more elders coming in, which I think other people to see, because people aren't seeing that we're actually doing that as well, and that is so important. This organization is not only led by somebody who's myself, but it's actually a circle approach. And I needed permission to do this. So even though I'm the owner, founder, it's actually a community of us coming together and running it in a circle where I don't own people and I don't do it in a business perspective, that it's all about us who want to support Indigenous people. And that's the way it needs to be. It's all of us coming together so that we could really support the people that we're working with. The toughest jobs. We have the toughest jobs, and having somebody to tell you what to do is not going to make that person work better for our people. So our organization really requires the support of elders ongoing. And I also want to acknowledge that a lot of me going back and reclaiming my culture is from a Treaty 8 territory. I also really need to honor the different territories and really connecting with the Treaty 6 territories. And so we really want people from this land to come forward and also share. And so we're always inviting people to come in and to share the knowledge and their teachings in such a respectful way so that we can, first of all, get connected to that knowledge, but also for our people that we work with.
There's a lot there that you said. So I'm just thinking into this too, like, you're so respectful. Like, even you're saying, like, I am Treaty 8, right? And this is Treaty 6, there are differences. And I think that's such a, this whole conversation I started by asking, is IPS Indigenous-Led? And instead of just saying yes, you gave a whole story, Leigh, which is wonderful, it's great. But I think that talks to humility and it talks to respect of what you're trying to do, right? And a lot of people, like, when they're asking this, it's a very important question. Because so often you've had colonizers, you've had colonization say, yeah, this is what you're going to do.
Or pretendian.
Yeah, exactly. You've had, we're going to help you, Indigenous people, and you're fine, give us your money, right? So I think it's so great that you took this time to give this very in-depth answer and perspective. So
one of the things that I could say is that's also been the biggest obstacle. It's been the absolute biggest obstacle is culture. One thing that we is because we're not a non-profit organization, that we're all for profit, that any of the funds that IPS makes, IPS is working in a way that it gets money from the government, third parties like IRS, FNIB to cover clients. Now, we get a $50 loss because the regular rate right now is $235 for psychological fee, and we get $187. We take a huge loss of supporting the people, and so that's why we're really passionate about this. But to have elders come in, sometimes that's such a huge financial cost that we try to do it as much as we can with what we have. And it's been such a barrier because some of these like elders, they need to be treated with respect and they need to be paid the money to so that they can do this work and continue to live. They have to live. And so culture has always been the biggest barrier, even for us, because of the financial cost that it brings. And a lot of the IPS funds, on a personal note, really has to go to the admin. The admin require a lot of admin to get people access to services. I have 4 out there. I have 5 admin. And they have to overcome barriers for these people to get access to that funding for counseling and then payment. It's been a very trying time to receive payment sometimes from these organizations that I need the admin to be on the phones all the time with Ottawa. And so what goes to the side is that, we'll get an elder next month. There's a lot of these financial barriers that we have to...
Yeah, and I think a lot of people probably don't realize that, right? You're trying to run an organization that puts people first. And unfortunately, you're doing so in a colonized country like Canada, which often doesn't put people first.
Yeah.
Right? So you're right, you do have your admin constantly on the phone saying, hey, we need this funding for our clients, right? And you have people being told, oh, you're not Indigenous enough to get FNIB or to get IRS, right?
Yeah.
You don't meet the Canadian version of an Indigenous person.
Yeah, and that colonial system that they have also holds back the funding. Mm-hmm. So if what it's really creating for what we're seeing for people to do is, we need a whole podcast on FNIB. That is like, there's so many things there. But what happens is if a client has went to another practice or saw another FNIB provider, their PA is on hold until that person calls. Well, some of our people don't have the minutes to use the phone for that long, because it's not a 20-minute phone call. Sometimes it's an hour on the phone. And just the obstacles that FNIB provides under people, it's almost saying like, you know, if you want this and you can have this is really gonna help you. We're gonna put it on hold because you have this over here that you said you're accessing. So what happens is sometimes our providers unfortunately don't get paid. Like there's a whole thing about Jordan's principle where 2 years none of our providers got paid, but we still supported people. And we really put the people first. That's why we encourage provisionals and interns to come in to provide free services so that we can keep these people supported.
Yeah. I remember, I don't know if you want to get too deep into this, but what was that? There's a figure you came up with about the amount of free therapy that you've given out.
Yeah, so the free therapy that we were able to get out was for a couple of things. You know, in our last podcast, I said there's not enough Indigenous FNIB providers. I've been working really hard at supporting Indigenous people in the field to get in the field. So I'm taking interns, I'm taking provisionals, and that's free support where these interns have to take a lot of training to be here. They have to take Indigenous awareness training, they have to take EMDR, they have to be in some kind of somatic training, my training. Marcus is part of a facilitator of our training. And so the interns that are focusing on Indigenous trauma, they have been able to provide free counseling so that we can also increase access, overcome those barriers, so that they can get into connection of a psychologist. So what I've been doing is really focusing on getting people in the field and supporting them. And I was able to provide free support for the past 3 years. So it was like, and also Jordan's principle, we never got paid, so there was a lot of free support that went to those kids. Many psychologists that don't get paid here, like I've offered free therapy to a few people throughout the year.
And I just want to clarify, it's free therapy, or free, the psychologists aren't being paid because you're not paying them, it's because they want to do this.
Well, yes, and we can't get money for them.
Right.
That FNIB has denied them an IRS.
And just to clarify too, for people who not know the acronyms, FNIB and IRS stand for?
First Nations Indian Health Benefits and Indian Residential School Fund. So we can't really offer free therapy as a business because we have to pay for the admin, we have to pay for this building, we have to pay for getting culture, like we need elders coming in. But what has happened is because I've been able to support people coming into the field and really trying to increase Indigenous psychologists, like just getting them in here and through the door, we've been able to provide free counseling. And also our FNIB providers that have not got paid also provided free therapy. So it's actually over 4,500 sessions that we've been able to do for free. But we kept it at 44 just to kind of like, yeah.
And that's I think the figure is over $600,000 of free therapy that you've given out.
Yeah, and I really wanted people to know what we're doing. And I don't want people to sit here and say, oh, that's amazing, way to go. That's not what I want. What I want is we need to get more FNIB Indigenous providers in the field. There's no support for them. And so people are looking for this type of service. This is a unique type of service that we offer. And also that this is needed. And I also wanted to acknowledge all of the providers that did that, that made that possible on our team, because nobody's ever said thank you. Like, like the government is not gonna say, good job, and as we've been providing, and the people are thankful that like the clients, and the Western word is clients, and people is our Indigenous word. They're very thankful, but I want to spread awareness that there are people here working very hard that are also allies as well, and that this is a needed service, and that we need to change the way people are accessing mental health for Indigenous people.
Yeah. Well, that's
long-winded again.
No, but it's very thorough, and I think that's what's important, because people that's why you listen to a podcast, right? This isn't TikTok. You're here to listen for the long haul. Do you want to talk a little bit about AFN? Yeah,
so we really are trying to advocate again for people and reducing barriers. And I brought some of our team up to the Assembly of First Nations, and the reason why that I wanted to get connected is I really wanted to see how we can change like mental health. for Indigenous people. And I'm still on a mission. I really, if anybody knows how we can do it, please contact me. But going to the Assembly of First Nations is a really good opportunity to also spread awareness, because there's many people and chiefs and communities that are actually not seeing the dangers of what and limitations of what First Nations Inuit health benefits are actually doing. Because I'm a provider, I'm seeing things, and I'm seeing things that other providers are doing, and I'm also witnessing what clients are bringing forward that of their experience. It's like an ethical situation. And so I really wanted to go and educate, bringing the team forward. Assembly of First Nations really taught me a lot. And I really encourage people to really get connected. There's a divide, you know, there's a divide in the Assembly of First Nations. That was really clear with some of the treaties across Turtle Island. Maybe that divide is gonna hurt us long term. If we could come together in solidarity and sovereignty, I think we can really do more to advocate for ourselves. But there is a divide. The second thing that I would like to say is I learned that 190 communities have no healthy water. And so that was really alarming to me, that a human rights thing kind of coming forward to get just clean water. They don't have clean water. And a story that just really speaks to me is the systematic racism that people have been experiencing with the police across Canada. It's a big thing, and when they were sharing their story with the Prime Minister there, we all stood up, and I mean, my eyes were watering, my throat was, you know, really, you know, you could feel it that our children are dying because of systematic racism. And so it shares with me that we really have to spread awareness, advocate, and I didn't realize, like, you can see it and you hear it, but if you don't feel it, you don't really realize the extent of it. And I knew that this was always an issue, but you don't see the extent. You know, you hear our stories here, but it's all of us across Canada. Human trafficking was another really big one.
My God.
Yeah, so human trafficking, Paul Brandt came in and did his speech, and 90% are Indigenous youth, ages of 13. The highest, right now for human trafficking, the highest province is Nova Scotia, and that's because of the port. And if we want to start changing things about human trafficking, that we actually have to start, we could go on to his site, Not My City, we can join. So I think that spreading that awareness is really key to supporting others. There was so many good things that came from attending the AFN, even though it's close to Christmas, that it's just really good to stay connected to the community, and that there's also people advocating for Jordan's principles so that our children can get services.
Yeah. I mean, you mentioned Christmas time, and I think it's important to talk about, you know, a lot of people see Christmas as this wonderful time spent with friends and family, and others, Christmas is very traumatic, and the holiday season itself is not a happy one. Do you want to talk about, like, how people can kind of get through it?
Yeah, so first of all, before Christmas, there's this kind of like this energy of excitement or anticipation. What am I going to get? Who's going to be around? And so sometimes that can be really, really big, and if it's not a good experience, we can have a really big letdown. Or we know that it may not be a good experience, so we're expecting something bad to happen. And what I would really recommend is during the Christmas holidays is take time to really listen to you and what you need. If you notice this energy or this really low, support yourself, listen to your body. Also have a plan. It's always good to have a plan. So for example, if I know I'm in a struggle with my family this year, how can I support myself knowing that or protect myself? Maybe I need to carry smudge with me in my heart. Maybe I need to journal I need to get the energy out, so I'm not putting the energy onto somebody. There's also many phone lines that people can connect to if they want to talk to somebody. Reach out to your therapist, really listen to you. Also understand that these events can trigger feelings Also, alcohol and substances can really bring that out. If you know you're not safe, or you know that there's alcohol involved, please understand that things can happen. If you just never know throughout the holidays, to have a plan with somebody. And so for example, if I'm really struggling with my family and there's somebody in there that drinks, and I have to travel, maybe I need to communicate with somebody to have a plan that I can connect with or communicate with, or who I can call to help support me, or a plan of maybe I'm not going to spend the night, I'm just going to go there for the day. Always to have a plan to support yourself. And there's this thing about honoring your wheel that is so important. Get the rest that you need, because rest can really impact your brain and your emotions. Really eat and take care of yourself, and supporting that you may need grounding, that you may need some breathing in the oxygen to get back into being grounded. And that is a really amazing way to support yourself, is breathing and working with the energy. Connect with the land, go for a walk. That wheel really supports you, and you're able to protect yourself. And when you have these big emotions and there's no place to put it down, you can call those the wellness line, you can call the suicide hotline, the abuse line. You can also reach out, if you're one of our clients, you could email our practitioners. We will have somebody on standby just in case to really support. We know that this can be trying. There's also the part that adds to this is the lack of money and the lack of food. And so that is a huge stressor, because that takes you into survival, where you're just basically making ends meet. And so reaching out to organizations that can offer, like, Bentero has a super bannock coming up, like getting the access to food, mustard seed. And also, it is very, very stressful when finances weigh this big cloud over your head. So, you don't feel like you have to buy everything to make somebody happy, but it could mean that maybe you're writing them a note, and it's called The Powerful Gift of Nothing. Maybe you could write them a note or a letter that's so meaningful. Maybe it's like painting a rock. It's the gift of nothing that can mean everything. And that's the part about Christmas that we really want to connect with. It's the time with family. It's giving something that means something to another person about my intention of really connecting, not necessarily buying presents, but we always overspend, and that can also be very overwhelming.
Yeah, I like that, to just give something that isn't of monetary value, right?
Yeah, bake something. Their favorite cookies.
Yeah, I would take
chips.
that. Yeah. All right. Well, we have then. If you want to give Leigh a present, give her chocolate chip cookies.
Yes. Yes.
Thank you so much for your time today.
Yeah, maybe I'll try out like a grounding for people to understand.
Sure, that'd be great. Let's do that.
Yeah. Okay, so one of my grounding things that if people are under stress that I really like to do, it is this butterfly hug. Everybody kind of knows this, and maybe one podcast I'll talk about the brain, but it's just this butterfly hug it's that right and left brain to kind of come online. So you do this 10 to 15 seconds. This isn't a strategy that you can just do for a minute. It's like a 10 to 15 minute, and then you stop and you breathe in and you breathe out, and then you do it again. And this other one, you may have to do this for a while. Breathe in and out. And another one is this hug where I hold like this, and I can tap my feet, tapping my feet. So my feet are tapping like this, and then for 10 to 15 seconds, breathe in, breathe out. This is a reminder that when we feel something, sometimes a feeling will only last 8 minutes. And to get rid of it, we only have to feel it. So just sitting with, if there's something uncomfortable, can I just really focus on my body to where that is and feel that? let it move, because it'll move. It's energy. Energy's always moving. And maybe my energy needs to be supported when I tap my feet, 15 seconds, and then breathe in and breathe out. You breathe out heat, you're actually breathing out carbon dioxide, you're breathing out anxiety. And then if 8 minutes and you still have it and it's so big, it can actually take 20 minutes to calm the nervous system. So I always like to scale. Where do you notice? How do you notice this? Are you at a 10? Let's try to bring it down. And maybe this doesn't work, that maybe we have to do different strategies. So there's this one with the hands where we cross over, and that's the right and left brain. They don't work together when we're stressed, but if we do these strategies, the right and left will start to work. 10 to 15 seconds, take a breath, breathe out through. Yeah.
That's great. I feel like sleeping.
Good. That means it works. You're a 1.
I'm very much a 1 right now. Thank you, Leigh.
Yes, you're
I
welcome.
appreciate it. We'll see you on our next podcast. Thank you.
Sounds good.